Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages.
Hi, this is Priyanka Lalwani, composer of the film The Strange Guest. And you are listening to me on the podcast Mysterious Goings On with the awesome host, Alexander Greenwood.
Is reading to your children a lost art? Is it just really tough? Okay, I got confession time here. I write books. I read like crazy. I was the kid who read like crazy, very high reading level. And once I had a child, I found it very difficult. It was so few hours in the day when you add work and all the other things to sit down and read with her. But not the few times, but the times we did, I found them to be very rewarding. And there's so many studies and so much information out there about how reading to a child and reading with a child and just storytelling with children is so important. And I don't think that's spoken about enough. And of course, here on Mysterious Goings On, we love to talk to authors of all stripes. That's why I'm really excited to have somebody who's got firsthand knowledge about storytelling with children. Michael Pellico is a medical researcher, writer, and film producer. He's one of 11 children whose parents both worked long hours. Sounds familiar, right? It was his responsibility to help raise his siblings. Growing up poor, he entertained them with stories and later telling stories to their children. In fact, his books and all of his stories are dedicated to Sabrina, his niece, who insists that he tell her a story each time they're together. Well, I would like to have a story from Michael Pellico right now. I want to hear what he's up to, how he started, and what's going on with him. Mike, welcome to Mysterious Goings On.
Well, thank you so much. But after that introduction, I have nothing to say. Can I go home now?
All right, I'll see you later.
You did such a great introduction. I'm then saying, wow, that's me.
Yeah, you're obviously a great guy, and I'm sitting here looking at your books. I have the books, listeners. I've got his books here. These are marvelous children's books. And Mike, I before we get into exactly the children's books themselves, you're a medical researcher. You have several patents. Where did this come from, and where did you find the time?
Well, my medical background, even when I was 8th grade, my principal of my school signed my report card to the future priestly scientist, because even in 8th grade, everybody knew I was going to be a scientist. It was in my blood. And I think I got that from my mother, who was a nurse. And I used to sneak upstairs into the attic and sit down and I'd look at her medical books. I found them fascinating. And I always had this curiosity, I have to say, that makes an important part of research. And so I just gravitated even through high school, and I just went to college just to do medical research. It was just in my blood. And now I have, I think, over 70 patents to my name in various, mostly medical. I'd say 90% are medical patents. And it's still what I do every day. I go to work every day. I have my own laboratory, and I sit down. I think it's the most incredibly detective type of work you can imagine, trying to solve problems that affect all of us. And you live and breathe it. You go home, you think about it all the time. Why do we age? Why does this happen? Why do we have 5 index fingers? These kind of things drive you to become a researcher. And it makes you realize how little we know. Quite honestly, that's not a joke to say that. We're just very primitive. We don't know why the brain works. Where our memory stored? We don't know. And so I find it fascinating. And I still think that if you ask me, what do? I do medical research, and that's what I'll say first and foremost. As a hobby, oh yes, I write children's books, and I enjoy that. As a hobby, yes, I make movies. Those are hobbies. They're wonderful. They're exhilarating. They're self-fulfilling. But I'm a researcher first and foremost, and I think that research curiosity helps me write books because I look at things from a different point of view.
Yeah, well, it's so great too to talk to a polymath like yourself, somebody who does all these things and does them very well.
Hold on a
And
second. Let me look up polymath, okay?
oh, sure, sure.
Don't
Come
use
on.
big words, okay? Come on.
70 patents, and you're going to tell me that I'm, oh, come on. All right, fair enough, fair enough. But Mike, if you don't mind, just real quick, is there a specific branch of medical research you do, or are you kind of all over the map, or what do you?
Well, I would say that specifically, I'm into autoimmune disorders, genetics, things like cancer, because these are all basic autoimmune disorders. I think I do some work as I would say as a side hobby within medical. I do love the study of aging and why we age and how we age and why we age and at what rate we age. And because I have a personal interest in that, I don't want to die. And if I do have to die, I want to die healthy. So finding a cure for aging, which is if as you get older, it's more and more diseases develop because your immune system starts to break down. And so finding a way to slow the aging process down or make it no, that's part of my research in a great extent.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I know we're not here to talk about that, but that's a side thing of mine. I'm reading on a constant. I'm in my mid 50s now, and I work out a lot. I feel like working out, not too much, but enough. Like I'm dressed to go to the gym after I'm done with our conversation, doing a boxing workout. I feel like that helps stave off the Grim Reaper a little bit.
It does. It does.
It does it? Okay, good. I wanted to hear that from you. You look like you work out as well. So.
Well, like for you, for the same reason, it slows down the aging process. We don't know why, but you have to have a fine line. If you exercise too much, you wear out body parts. If you exercise not enough, okay, you become sedentary and you end up other issues. So you have to, it's like a car. If you don't drive the car, things go wrong. If you drive the car too hard, too fast, things go wrong. And your body is like that.
Wow. That is, I got to remember that. Yeah, because I got into a point where I gained the COVID-19, the literal weight, and I got back in my kickboxing and boxing gym stuff. But I was going 5 days a week just to kind of restart my metabolism. I was hurting myself, But anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking though.
No, but I think you're doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. Thank you. I mean, it's good because
you look healthy. That's great. I can see from here, just looking at you, you look like you're in shape.
Well, thank you too. I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and I've got to dance at her wedding and embarrass her and do those things.
That's true. That's a nice goal to have.
Yeah, that's my goal. All right, I got to tell you, I got a box in the mail from your publicist, I think, but from your outfit, and I opened it up, and there's these wonderful, beautiful, and folks at mgopod.com, you're going to see these book covers. There are going to be photos of these books there that you can go find. I find these beautifully done children's books, and we're talking about everything from friendship to Christmas to Halloween, but all of them have these wonderful messages. So, as I said in the introduction, I know that you got this bug for storytelling, if you will, pardon the term bug, but if you got this storytelling gene activated, how about that? Taking care of your siblings. But then you had a special niece who really kind of brought that forward and was the impetus for these books. Is that right?
That's true. She would come over to my house every day because her father, my brother, lives next to me, quite close to me, and they'd come over every night, and she'd sit with me and say, "Mikey, tell me a story." And we were sitting in the pool in the backyard. She'd sit in the water next to me. She's, "Mikey, tell me a story." And I say, "Well, what about what?" And she'd point to something, and it didn't matter what. And she'd say, "Tell me about that," or "Tell me about that bird," or "Tell me about anything." And it was when she was very little, the stories were very simple stories. And one time, for example, we were sitting in the backyard, and in the tree, I had cleverly put a little glass jar in there that had LED lights in there that were solar activated. So when it got dark, they were kind of flashing. And I said, "Look at Sabrina, fairies have made a house in our tree." And I said, "I can understand fairy talk because they talk with flashing lights." So I would pretend, I'd say to her, "Oh, they're asking who you are." And she'd tell me, "Who are you?" She's, "I'm Sabrina." I'd say that I'd look at the lights and say, "She is Sabrina. And who are you?" And "Oh, that's Princess Layla. She's the princess of the fair." And I had this conversation going on for a half hour. Spur of the moment, it was one of the most enjoyable memories of my life. And so she would look forward to me telling her stories, and I would look forward to telling her the stories. And one day, her mother said, "Mikey, these are wonderful stories. We love listening to you. Why don't you write them down?" I said, I never thought about that. And so I started writing these stories down. And nothing is planned in my life, nothing. So all of a sudden I started writing these stories down, and then one story became another story, and then tell me another story. And so it just evolved that way. And one time, I tell you an interesting story. One time I got a knock on my door, and I opened the door, and there was this lady standing there. She goes, I said, hi. She goes, are you Michael Pellico? I said, I am. She goes, are you Sabrina's uncle? I go, I am. She goes, Sabrina's always in school telling us about you. And she's like, I think she was in like fifth grade. No, I mean, I'm sorry, I think about third grade. She says, could you come to our school and tell a story to the children? So I went to this on that Thursday. I went to this, and all these little children gathered around me, and I sat on the floor, and I told them a story. And all the teachers, I can see all the teachers in the background just listening. And the children, what I was doing, I would add, when I tell a story with the children, I get the children involved by saying, and here comes a horrible dragon. What color do you think the dragon was? And am I green? Right? Yes, that's right. He was green. And so I got the children so excited. So they became, without realizing, they became the storytellers with me. And I do the same thing with Sabrina. I'll say to Sabrina, what should we have at the birthday party? And she said, sushi. Okay, we're having sushi. So, I mean, so I found it helping her involved in the story made her more excited about reading the book. And now she is a prolific, like you. She reads, she sits on the dinner table with a book in her hand. She's like you. She has learned to love reading. Why? Because she helped write the stories.
That's what I said too. I wish I kind of transferred as much of my love for reading to my daughter. It's just different now, I think, but to a degree. So you've done a magnificent service to this young person by doing this. Of course, she's definitely helped you too, as to tell these stories.
It's mutual.
Yeah. So when you decided to do this, did you create Moonbow Publishing, or?
Well, yes, exactly. In other words, it's one of those things of necessity. I took my first manuscript, I think it was called The Little Witch, and I went to a meeting where they had all these book publishers were there, and book agents were there, et cetera, et cetera. And you had this thing where you had 7 or 8 minutes with each agent, then you moved on. So you had a list of who you could see, you had appointments, blah, blah,
kind
blah.
of speed dating kind of deal.
Yeah, speed dating kind of with agents.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized I had no chance to get my book published. There was 500 people at this meeting, all holding a manuscript, which they thought was the next great Gatsby. And I could see right away that everybody thought their story was the greatest in the world. And my story was my story. And even though I thought it was wonderful, I can see these book publishers saying, and the agents, they were glazed over by the 10th meeting.
Sure.
And so I realized there's no chance of me getting my books published, and I understood it. I understand why, and I'm not criticizing anything.
Sure.
So I went home and I decided I'm going to publish my own books under my own publishing company, and I called it Moonbow Publishing. It based on a moonbow. A moonbow is a rainbow that appears at night, and it's very rare, and they're real. So I called it Moonbow Publishing. So I print my own books right here in America, and now I can have my own books printed and distributed. Otherwise, I'd be standing in line to this day holding a manuscript and probably be disillusioned.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of our listeners, I know for a fact, a lot of our listeners are writers. They can all definitely, I can hear them all, not hearing them, sighing, going, yes, we've been there, and brother from another mother and all those things. So what fascinates me too, I had an uncle who once said, because I write mysteries and stuff, and he said, you ought to write a children's book. And you know what? It's not in me. It's just not. And that's okay. You write what you want to write. You write those things. I tried to write something for my daughter the way you have for your, it just didn't flow for me. And I can't get out of my own head. That's my problem. But what I was going to say though is,
why don't you write a mystery like Nancy Drew, which is a mystery for children, but it's a mystery.
That's not a
Hardy Boys. Come on, you can do those.
You know what, Mike? That's a good idea. I will keep that in mind. But but I wanted to ask you though. There's one element of what you do that's different from what I do. No, it's hugely different. But I'll tell you why. Now, I obviously pay a cover artist to do my covers, but you're paying an actual illustrator to bring your words to life in these books. So I'm just curious, how did you go about finding these wonderful illustrators?
And by the way, I have 2 illustrators, Melaine Newman and Christina Berry, and they're both amazing illustrators in their own, and they write in a totally different style. You can tell Christmas Tree Book versus the Unusual Friend. Christina Berry writes in a more surreal, gentle way, And I love her for the Little Witch. It worked out perfect. And
Yeah.
she is a great illustrator, a great artist. And she's actually going to school to be a microbiologist. But as a hobby, she does these great, wonderful illustrations. And she also, and I have to be honest with you, all my illustrators, they get a copy of my manuscript and they start adding to it. They can't help themselves. They're like me. And, oh, Mikey, how about putting this in there? Or how about, and I think, about, yeah, okay, well, that's not a bad idea. You know, so I mean, I will admit that I plagiarize everybody's suggestions because everybody has good ideas and I put them in the book. And I like that because it's accumulation that makes a great story. Right. And
Yeah.
so Christina Berry and I are very good friends, and she does this great story. She did an Unusual Friend. She did a Little Witch book, and she's going to do my third one. Melaine Newman is a different type of artist. I want to call her a artist with just more bright graphic detail, like the Christmas tree book. She almost writes like a Dr. Seuss type. And she's a wonderful, wonderful artist. She lives up in a ranch up in the high desert by herself, almost like a beautiful hermit. She has her horses and her dogs and her cats, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful lady. And she has this incredible, and she also helps me lay out my books. So she'll put them in chapter form. She'll do the most, so she's not only an artist, but they take these become their projects too. These become their books. So it becomes a great team. And I rely on them, and not only for the illustrations, but for just great suggestions all the way along the process.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that either, because they're collaborating with you on the book. But even I use beta readers on my books, and I don't promise them I will use every suggestion, but you can bet there's going to be one or two usually, right, that come along that you're like, I think I'll do that. So of course, there's something that goes through here too. I should mention, by the way, that the Perfect Christmas Tree that you talked about, Melaine illustrated, that she wrote as a Mom's Choice Award winner. Congratulations, honoring excellence in children's books. But there is a moral component to these stories, correct?
Unintentional, I guess, but it's the way I write. I don't plan to put a moral in there. I try to write books from a different point of view. I think that one of the things I do well is I look at things from an alternate point of view. For example, the Christmas tree book is written from the Christmas tree point of view. Nobody has ever really done that before. And the Unusual Friend, I wrote from the fact that sharks are misunderstood.
Yeah.
And let's look at it from that point of view. And so all my books are written from a point of view that may be different from normal. And is there a moral to the story? I say yes. Don't prejudge. Number one. Tend to look at the other point, which we don't do in society today in general, even in politics. Right. We don't listen to the other person's point of view. It's my view and you're wrong. And so I try to put my own, I always try to teach people to look at the other side of the equation, the other side of the person's point of view. And you'd be surprised. You may find out that you're still right, and you may think they're still wrong, but you may think, you know what? That may be right. So I think my books have that alternative message in there. I'm not saying I do this intentionally, but it turns out that way.
Yeah, there's just a fundamental decency here. You're just teaching children to not, pardon the pun, judge a book by its cover. That's kind of a deal that's going here. And by the way, next time you talk to Melaine, tell her I agree. By her Christmas tree illustrations they're Seussian. I do agree. I'm not saying she's ripping them off at all. She's got her own way with it, but they're really
style. Well, she did that. She did Princess Sabrina Pot of Gold book too, which is again beautiful graphic artwork.
Oh yeah, that's some great stuff. It's some great stuff. Well, so how does this work? Do you sell them actively everywhere? Do you do readings locally? What are you doing with these?
No, I don't do readings locally unless I got my arm twisted behind my back. It's a matter of time. But we sell all over the United States. We sell through Ingram and other big book publishers. I was very lucky to get on board with them. So we do our own. We have our own webpage. We have a little social media going, not much, and we do some advertising like Publishers Weekly and things like that. It's not a big effort, but it's the books are selling well.
Good.
And
good.
We're getting great letters from people on it and how much they love the books. So I feel I'm at a very point in my life where I'm very happy that my books are actually selling and are appreciated. And I would never probably be on the New York bestseller list, but I don't care
Right.
I'm having a great time, and parents call me up all the time and send me these beautiful videos of the children reading the books, and I feel happy. I feel like I've succeeded.
You can't get much better than that. Of course, a New York Times bestseller would be nice, but it's not what drives you, obviously. So I want to go back, if you don't mind, because I think this informs a little bit, coming full circle here in our discussion, though. So did I get this right? You didn't have a television as a child, right?
Well, I wanted one. I used to sneak down to my uncle's house and watch his. I used to watch Howdy Doody on his television, but no, we didn't have one. We didn't. My parents, one, didn't believe in them, and two, they couldn't afford one back then.
Right.
And 11 children, we could, that was considered a luxury.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a TV, so we'd sit around and we'd entertain ourselves, destroying the house and telling stories, which because I was the oldest of 11, I would be the storyteller, and also participated in destroying the house. But I would admit it now. But so storytelling became our way of, if you look at old movies, and that's what children did. They sat around and told stories and made their own toys. And we did that for a great extent. I'm not going to tell you how old I am now because I'm too depressed. But when I grew up in a farm in upstate New York, and I really had an ice box, a little ice box. The iceman would come over and bring over the ice.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to Chicago and I went to the upper school in a city, and I say to the kids, yeah, I'm going home and I got some food in the ice box. My ice box, and I realized nobody knew what the heck I was talking about. I actually grew up having that kind of stuff. So I was old school. So growing up without a TV was natural for us. I would just tell the stories.
Mike, I have to tell you, and don't reach to the screen and hit me, but my grandparents had an ice box, and they always called the fridge an ice box, and we got the ice box when they passed on. Okay, and my dad refinished it, and it's at their house, and I mean it was just a piece of alien ephemera to me. But you lift the top, you put the block in, the food goes in the thing with the door. Man, I haven't heard ice. You just made me miss my grandmother because she called everything.
Well, yes, exactly. I grew up with. I mean, I had a Victrola with a big horn and a big heavy needle.
Holy cow!
So when I grew up and going to Chicago, I'd say, "Yeah, I'm going home. I have a Victrola," and people just look at me like, "Am I an alien?" So again, going back, why did storytelling? Because that's what we grew up with. We grew up without these TVs and things like that. We grew up sitting around one radio that had 2 or 3 stations on it, and that was our life. That was our entertainment.
Well, that's what it kind of concerns me, is that I think to a degree I think kids are overstimulated in some ways. All these electronics and all these things. We very much limit screen time for our child, and I'm sure she'll be in therapy the rest of her life because I limited her screen time, but that's fine. But I just think about that a lot, in that when I was a kid, there were 4 kids, and in not very opulent setting. Now we had a television with 4 whole channels and that kind of thing, but I know that I always think back to summer vacation, and it was basically, we always joked that mom would just kick us out with a bologna sandwich and lock the door and say, "Come back at dusk." Not far from the truth, to be honest, but I think it taught us reliance, and it taught us imagination, and we would play everything from army to cowboys to we climb trees, we do all these things, and I'm trying not to like sweeten the past as if it was somehow 100% better than it is now. But I guess my point to you is, and I wonder, since you have kind of both sides of your brain going on here as a researcher and as a storyteller, do you think though that maybe well, I think it's obvious that sparked a lot of your storytelling abilities, but do you think that would you offer that to other writers, perhaps, that maybe unplug and really spend some time with yourself and without stimulation if you're wanting to write stories?
I think when I'm listening to you talk right now, and you're 100% right, that I think we had to entertain ourselves, which means we had to become creative to entertain ourselves.
Yeah.
Today, you are being entertained. You're the audience now. Before, we were the audience and the entertainer, which developed our sense of creativity, developed our sense of individual styles.
Right.
And if you're just sitting in front of a TV or got an iPad or something in front of you, you're being entertained. But how is that creating your own creativity? You're really not. So books, of course, I think, and I have a book in my hand every second, even to this day, books allow me to let my imagination run wild. And after I get a phone with a book, it stays with me, the good parts of the book. And I always think about that. It takes me to a different land, which I'll never be able to visit someday. I say, go back to reading, go back to being creative yourself, creating things. Don't have a life of being entertained. I think you're being a great father by limiting your daughter's entertainment time. And someday she's going to really, really, really appreciate that, because she's going to have to face things in the world where she has to use her own intuitive sense to solve a problem. She can't turn on a TV or Google something. It's her own personal problem. And she needs to rely on what she's learned in the past, her creativity to solve these problems. And I think you're giving her that pathway already.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. Let me ask you again, as I know, sadly, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you, what trends are you seeing in children's books today, and how do you feel about them?
That's a mix. I don't want to get on that bandwagon, but I think when I was growing up, I read the classics, Silas Marner, Great Expectations. I read Dickens.
Johnny Tremain. Did you read Johnny Tremain?
Of course. And you have to read books like like the Hardy Boys and all that. And you have to read books like Tom Sawyer. These were classics. And why were they classics? Because they are.
Yeah.
And I would encourage parents today to give their children the classics, because they are so well written. They all have some great stories behind them. Today, I think a lot of books could be classics someday. I'm not questioning that. But also many books today are almost written with an agenda. And I don't like that. They're hitting the story like boom, boom on your head with a hammer.
Yeah.
Here's the moral behind this story. It's not subtle. It's like, I'm going to write a book about this, and I'm going to make sure that it's so glaring, and it takes away from the storytelling. You might be reading. You might be reading a treatise on something. So I think classics, the Odyssey, the Iliad. These are phenomenal stories. Phenomenal. Then read the current stories, knowing that one out of 100 will be good.
Yeah. And
that maybe 2 or 3 out of 100 will be good, and the rest of them will be simply wasted. But you read them.
Right.
But I think you need a foundation of classics first.
Yeah, I think it's important too, and I think smart kids who read will make connections between things they see going forward. I mean, if you just look back, the hero's journey is Star Wars is all about the hero's journey, and all, Seven Samurai, all these different things, you can all pull these things together. Yeah, so I love that. And I was going to say this, and I seriously, no false praise here, but you don't talk down to kids with your stories. You tell me a little bit about that.
They're my collaborators, and I go into their world with them, and I take their ideas with my ideas. We create a story together. So I'm not talking down to them, because they're an integral part of the storytelling process, and I encourage that with them, because it opens up their own curiosity, it opens up their own idea of writing stories themselves. And yeah, a lot of that don't talk down to children, not realizing that children are super, super smart. Yeah. And they listen to you, and they are thinking way beyond what you think. And I mean, if I had more time, I'd tell you a story. The other day, I was talking to one of my friends about the issues we have now with transgender children and all this kind of stuff. And I was explaining, I think a lot of these children going through this, especially girls going through, when they're at a certain age, they're really unsure of their body. Their bodies are changing rapidly, and they don't understand this, and they're frightened by it to a great extent. And I said, and I was talking to my friends about that. There were 2 doctors. We're nodding at each other. We're talking about this, that a lot of these girls are shocked by this sudden change. It happens almost overnight, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to handle it. So a lot of them need constantly good parental, good support, and all this kind of stuff. And Sabrina had been sitting there playing with something on the side. Later on that day, we're out dinner. She looked at me. She says, "Mikey, why aren't girls happy with their bodies?" And I was shocked that she actually was listening, not saying anything, but listening to the conversation so closely that she caught that on, and she had been mulling it over in her own mind. What does that mean? So she had asked me. That tells you, don't talk down to children. They're aware. Oh yeah. Yeah, and my 13-year-old will let me know if I do. And that's one thing, though. That's one thing I'll tell you, that that's one thing that we as parents didn't do. We didn't kind of baby talk them. We didn't go tell them about the horrors of the world when they were 3 or 4 years old. But we talked to them like little people, not little adults, but little people. Sure. And one thing we've always heard. Here I am patting myself on the back. I'm just saying, though, I think this worked because
to this day, we're told that our daughter's well-spoken, she's thoughtful in those regards. And I think that helped because she was treated like a fully functional, thinking human being. So I love that when I read your books, because I'm not, as you may guess, as a 53-year-old man, I'm not constantly reading children's books these days, but to get these wonderful books and read them, and I went, gosh, this Pellico guy, he knows what he's doing. Mike, how do people get these books? Where do they go? Where are you on the web? Moonbowpublishing.com?
Yes, Amazon. You can go to Amazon like everybody goes, and you can look at these books on Amazon, either through my name or through the name title of the book. Also go to Moonbow Publishing and look at my books, and we have our own website there. Those are the two ways to get them, I suspect. By the way, have you seen my latest movie?
I have not.
Skater Girl.
Oh,
I filmed that in India. I wrote the story, and so I'm very proud of it, because you talk about stories. I thought about that. I wrote that story. It's called Skater Girl. It takes place in India. It became number 8 in the world on Netflix, and it's on Netflix right now. It's 127 countries and 38 languages.
Mike, forgive me. I looked at your IMDb and I didn't see that, but I've actually heard of that movie.
It's a great. I liked it, and people loved that movie. If they have a chance to watch it, we'll watch it.
I will.
I'm not touting my movie. It's out of my hands already. But I just want, if you want to call it kind of writing, see, that's more of an adult story that I wrote.
Yeah.
So
Mike, I will check that out. And folks, I'll put a link to his IMDb in the show notes on mgopod.com, because you're going to want to go check out his films, whether he's produced them or wrote them. And I'm going to tell you right now, this will come out before Christmas. So, the perfect Christmas tree would make a heck of a good gift. So you might want to check that out. And of course, there's The Little Witch, and then book 2, The Little Witch's Birthday Party, and there'll be a book 3 soon. And of course, you shark fans, it doesn't have to be Shark Week for you to read An Unusual Friend, which is about the misunderstood.
The Little Witch is a series now. It's going to be a series on Netflix.
Holy cats! Really?
Mm-hmm.
Are you producing?
Yes. Yes, we're producing it. It's a series. It's a story. So the stories, and it's really funny because the story started out very simple. The Little Witch first book was kind of a cute little story.
Yeah.
Sabrina needed a story to tell her class for Halloween. I wrote that really quickly, but it's becoming evolving now. So as she's getting older, I'm making the story more complicated. The stories are growing up with her.
Oh my goodness! And I think I've started to see that. If you look at the 2 books, they do move along with her.
Yes.
Well, congrats on all your success, Mike. That's fantastic.
Thank you. And congratulations on your success as a great father. How important that is. Seriously, that's so important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, the books are An Unusual Friend, The Little Witch series, Perfect Christmas Tree. There'll be links in the show notes at mgopod.com, and you'll be able to find Mike Pellico's books there. Mike Pellico, thank you so much for joining us here. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. You're terrific. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget, we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.